just hours after a major ceasefire was announced. The explosion started again. Israeli airstrikes, Hezbollah rocket attacks, political accusations, and growing fears that the latest attempt to stop the fighting between Israel and Lebanon could be falling apart before it even begins. After days of intense diplomacy involving Washington, Jerusalem, and Beirut, the world was told that a renewed ceasefire was finally in place. But one critical question remains. What happens when one of the main groups involved doesn't fully accept the deal? And could this fragile agreement become the next major flashpoint in the Middle East? Stay with us, because the story behind this ceasefire is far more complicated than the headlines suggest. Welcome back to Cobalt. Today we're breaking down the renewed Israel-Lebanon ceasefire, why it was signed, why it is already under pressure, and what could happen next as tensions continue to spread across the region. Because while politicians are calling this a path toward peace, the reality on the ground tells a very different story. The latest ceasefire emerged after US-mediated negotiations involving Israel and Lebanon. The agreement is designed to halt months of escalating violence along the border and create conditions for a broader peace process. According to the deal, Hezbollah would stop attacks and withdraw forces from areas south of the Litani River, while Lebanese security forces would take greater control of those regions. Israel agreed to participate in the arrangement while broader talks continue. On paper, it sounds straightforward, but the problem is that ceasefires in this conflict are rarely simple. Previous agreements reached earlier this year struggled to hold as violence repeatedly returned to the border. Even before this latest announcement, fighting had continued despite earlier ceasefire attempts. This newest deal was presented as a major breakthrough. The United States hoped it could reduce regional tensions and create momentum for wider diplomatic efforts across the Middle East. But almost immediately, cracks began to appear. The biggest challenge facing the ceasefire is also the most obvious one. Hezbollah has rejected key parts of the agreement. The group objected to demands that its fighters withdraw from southern Lebanon, while Israeli forces remain active in certain areas. Hezbollah leaders described elements of the deal as unacceptable and argued that any lasting ceasefire would require a full Israeli withdrawal as well. That creates a serious problem, because while Israel and Lebanon can sign documents and issue statements, the actual fighting on the ground largely involves Israel and Hezbollah. And if Hezbollah doesn't fully accept the terms, the ceasefire immediately becomes fragile. Analysts have warned that the agreement is missing one of the key actors necessary to guarantee long-term stability. It's a bit like trying to stop a boxing match by negotiating with only one fighter. The paper may be signed, but the punches can keep coming. That's exactly what happened. Reports emerged of continued military activity almost immediately after the agreement was announced. Israeli strikes continued in parts of southern Lebanon, while Hezbollah attacks and cross-border exchanges were also reported. Both sides accused the other of undermining the ceasefire. For people living near the border, the ceasefire did not suddenly bring peace. Instead, many residents saw another familiar pattern. An agreement is announced. Everyone hopes it will hold. Then fighting resumes. The danger is that every violation increases mistrust, and every new strike creates pressure for retaliation. That's how ceasefires gradually unravel, not always through one massive attack, but through dozens of smaller incidents that slowly destroy confidence in the deal. This isn't just a border dispute. The conflict is connected to a much larger regional struggle involving Israel, Iran, Hezbollah, and the United States. The ceasefire was viewed as an important piece of broader diplomatic efforts aimed at reducing tensions across the Middle East. Several reports indicate that developments in Lebanon are closely linked to wider negotiations involving Iran and regional security concerns. That's why governments around the world are watching closely. If the ceasefire succeeds, it could help stabilize one of the region's most dangerous flashpoints. If it fails, it could trigger another cycle of escalation. And history shows how quickly that can happen. The Israel-Hezbollah conflict has repeatedly moved from limited exchanges to major military confrontations. Each side claims it is responding to the other's actions. Each side believes it is acting defensively, and the result is often a dangerous escalation spiral. One reason this ceasefire is so difficult to enforce is geography. Southern Lebanon has become one of the most heavily contested regions in the Middle East. The proposed agreement includes areas where Lebanese forces would assume greater responsibility and where non-state armed groups would be excluded. but implementing such arrangements is far easier on paper than in reality. Military commanders have to verify withdrawals. Security forces must establish control. Intelligence agencies must monitor compliance. And all of that takes time. The challenge becomes even greater when trust between the parties is extremely low. Every movement can be interpreted as preparation for an attack. Every delay can be viewed as bad faith, and every explosion can threaten the entire process. Lebanese leaders have described the current moment as a critical opportunity to prevent a larger conflict. Diplomats hope this agreement can survive long enough to open the door to broader negotiations later this month. But hope and reality are not the same thing. The ceasefire is entering its most dangerous phase, the first few days. This is the period when both sides test boundaries, when misunderstandings happen, when hardliners look for reasons to reject compromise, and when a single incident can change everything. The world has seen this story before. The question is whether this time will be different. For now, the ceasefire technically exists, but the fighting hasn't fully stopped. Israel says security conditions must be met. Hezbollah says the agreement is unacceptable in its current form. Lebanon is trying to prevent another major war, and diplomats are racing against time. The renewed ceasefire may represent the best chance for stability in months, or it may become another example of how difficult peace can be in one of the world's most volatile regions. The next few days could determine which path the Middle East takes, and we'll be watching every development. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more coverage of the conflicts shaping the future battlefield, make sure to subscribe to Cobalt.